Being liked and being respected feel like the same thing, until they are not. Research shows that highly agreeable people earn roughly 26% less than their peers, not because kindness is a flaw, but because something in the pattern signals the wrong thing. The question is what that something is, and where it actually starts. Patterns of people-pleasing often take root long before anyone notices a problem. In daily life, the drive to be agreeable shows up in small, familiar habits, saying yes to extra work even when overloaded, smoothing over disagreements before they start, or apologizing for having a different opinion. These behaviors can feel automatic, almost like a reflex, and they're usually reinforced by positive feedback. Praise for being easy to work with, gratitude for flexibility, or relief from avoiding conflict all serve as rewards that make the habit stronger over time. Psychologists point to deeper forces behind this cycle. Attachment theory describes how, for some, the urge to please others grows out of a fear of losing connection. This is especially true for those with anxious attachment patterns, who may learn early on that harmony and approval are the price of acceptance. The result is a constant scanning for signs of disapproval and a quick willingness to adjust, even at personal cost. Over time, saying yes too often becomes a strategy for feeling safe, not just liked. Operant conditioning offers another lens. Each time someone avoids an uncomfortable conversation and feels the tension disappear, the brain quietly registers relief. That relief acts as a reward, encouraging more avoidance in the future. The absence of negative consequences, like confrontation or rejection, teaches the mind that being agreeable is the safest path. But as these habits become ingrained, personal boundaries start to blur. Requests from others begin to override one's own needs, and small concessions pile up until it's hard to remember the last time a real preference was voiced. For many, this pattern is invisible until it leads to exhaustion or resentment. The signals are subtle, agreeing to tasks that feel unfair, hesitating to state a preference, or feeling anxious when asked to make a decision that might disappoint someone. These are not signs of weakness or a lack of kindness, but evidence of a pattern shaped by early experiences and reinforced by daily rewards. Recognizing these habits is the first step toward understanding how excessive niceness can quietly shape the way others respond, and how easily it can become the default mode of relating to the world. When personal boundaries fade, the effects ripple through every part of life. Tasks that once felt optional become expectations, and the quiet assumption grows that you will always step up, no matter how much is already on your plate. In workplaces, this is known as role creep, where responsibilities expand not because of promotion or recognition, but because saying no feels impossible. Over time, the list of duties grows, while the sense of control shrinks. The emotional cost is often hidden. Research in large organizations, like the PT Telcom Access study of 125 employees, found that agreeableness on its own did not directly predict burnout, but context made the difference. When high agreeableness was paired with heavy workloads or low autonomy, exhaustion became more likely. In healthcare settings, where emotional labor is constant, reviews show that suppressing disagreement or always putting others first intensifies emotional fatigue. Clinicians who avoid conflict to keep the peace report higher levels of hidden stress and eventual burnout, even if their outward demeanor remains calm and pleasant. Faculty and medical staff studies reveal a more nuanced pattern. Low agreeableness predicted higher burnout for some, but high agreeableness only protected against exhaustion when paired with real decision-making power. Without that, even the most cooperative workers felt the strain. What emerges is not a simple story of kindness causing collapse, but a pattern where the lack of boundaries quietly drains energy. The real danger lies in the invisible labor, absorbing extra tasks, smoothing over problems, and carrying emotional weight that others do not see. As boundaries erode, the risk is not only personal exhaustion. The habit of constant accommodation can become so routine that it is barely noticed until resentment or chronic fatigue finally surfaces. This gradual buildup of hidden labor sets the stage for how others interpret these patterns, not just as helpfulness, but as a signal about how much respect and consideration you expect in return. Respect in social and professional settings rarely depends on intention alone. Instead, it's shaped by a set of unwritten rules that others apply, often unconsciously. Researchers studying workplace dynamics have found that the way people are treated, who gets listened to, who is given authority, whose opinions are taken seriously, can be traced back to a handful of observable cues. These include posture, voice, word choice, and even how quickly someone responds in conversation. Eye-tracking studies reveal that people pay less visual attention to colleagues who use non-dominant postures or speak with a soft, hesitant tone. In one experiment, participants watched video calls between actors playing employees. The actors who used more deferential language and frequent apologies received 30% fewer chances to speak and 35% fewer direct gazes from others. These small signals, repeated over time, influence whether someone is seen as a credible contributor or quietly overlooked. Organizational surveys back up these findings. When teams rate each other on perceived competence and warmth, those who score high on warmth but low on competence are less likely to be chosen for leadership roles, regardless of their actual skill. In a multi-site survey of over 3,000 employees, each standard deviation increase in perceived competence raised the odds of being assigned a lead role by 1.73 times, while high warmth alone had almost no effect. The respect and credibility scale, a tool used in these studies, shows a strong link between competence perception and influence within a group. These patterns play out in everyday interactions. People who default to accommodating language, using phrases like maybe or I think, are often coded as less authoritative by peers and by supervisors. Over time, these cues accumulate, quietly shaping who is trusted with responsibility and who is bypassed when important decisions are made. The result is a measurable gap in influence that can't be explained by kindness or work ethic alone. Instead, it's the visible cues of competence and self-assurance that tip the scales of respect. Maya had always been the first to volunteer, the one who stayed late and took on the work no one else wanted. When a promotion opened up in her department, she assumed her reliability would count in her favor. Instead, the offer went to someone who was less available but more vocal about their achievements. Later, Maya learned that highly agreeable workers in her industry earn, on average, 8 to 12% less than their more assertive peers. The wage gap is widest for men, but the pattern holds across roles. Those who avoid negotiation or never push back often find their contributions quietly discounted. Priya's story played out in a smaller circle. In her friend group, she was always the peacekeeper, smoothing over conflicts and rarely expressing her own preferences. Over time, her friends began making plans without asking for her input. When she finally tried to set a boundary, turning down a last-minute favor, she worried about disappointing everyone. But the reaction was brief surprise, then acceptance. The group adjusted, and Priya found that speaking up did not end relationships. It made her voice part of the conversation. Daniel, a junior analyst, noticed he was rarely called on in meetings, even though he had ideas to share. Reviewing his own emails, he saw a pattern. Nearly every suggestion began with, "I might be wrong, but," or, "just a thought, feel free to ignore." Linguistic analysis confirms that this kind of hedging language, measured with a correlation of -0.34 with peer respect, reliably signals low confidence. Daniel decided to test a new approach. Instead of apologizing, he started with direct statements. "I recommend we try X because..." Within weeks, colleagues began responding to his points, and his manager asked him to lead a small project. These small shifts, setting a limit, stating a preference, using clear language, are supported by research on competence cues. Intervention studies show that when people combine warmth with assertiveness, observers update their perceptions from mere likability to genuine respect. The bias map predicts this transition. Pity and passive support can turn into admiration and active trust when competence is made visible. For Maya, Priya, and Daniel, changing a few words or actions proved enough to alter how others responded. It is these micro-interventions, not a complete personality overhaul, that move the needle on respect. In today's world, genuine respect hinges on clear boundaries, not just goodwill. As studies confirm, assertiveness and self-respect shape how others respond to us, at work and beyond. Choosing authenticity over approval isn't easy, but it's how real respect begins. What does self-respect look like for you?